Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This is the last Sabbath of the year, and we're coming together to fellowship with you and to cover, well, starting on chapter 10, verse 25 of 4th Ezra. He had just finished having his speech where he was talking to our Creator again and petitioning him, asking questions, and then afterwards he receives a vision. So this is where we're at. Thank you for your time, and we hope you enjoy. So, a vision of the Shamayim Yarushalem. And it came to pass while I was talking with her, behold, her face upon a sudden shined exceedingly, and her countenance glistened, so that I was afraid of her and mused what it might be. And behold, suddenly she made a great cry, very fearful, so that the eretz shook at the sound of the woman. And I looked, and behold, the woman appeared to me no more, but there was a city built, and a large place was shown itself from the foundations. Then was I afraid, and cried with a loud voice, and said, where is Oriel, the messenger, who came to me at the first? For he has brought me into this overpowering bewilderment, and my end has turned into corruption, and my prayer to reproach. So he's pretty baffled by what he's seen, and it's it's quite the shock for him. If any of you remember, or if you're not familiar, you can look at this, but in the Shepherd of Hermas, Hermas is also seeing visions of the assembly, or a woman who appears to him in different forms as time goes on. She's actually looks old and raggedy at first, and she's getting more and more beautiful and respectable looking and well taken care of as time goes on, because his inner being is being restored. And it was a parallel with the assembly reflecting how he was. But it was explained to him that our Mashiach was revealing these things to him, but he was not able to receive him as he was, and he came to him in the way that he could be received, which was as the assembly. So it's an interesting parallel with what's right here. However, at this time, Ezra doesn't get quite that explanation. And if you think about it, this is before our Mashiach came in the flesh and revealed himself. So he was not yet dead or preaching his death until he came. And if you recall, in the Besorah, all the good news accounts, as they're called, his taught ones continually didn't comprehend things correctly until after he rose from the dead and he breathed on them. So it's the same picture in history as it was when he walked it out. It's a rather interesting parallel there, but we can do that with all of Scripture. All right, to continue. And as I was speaking these words, behold, the Melech who had come to me at first came to me and looked upon me. And behold, I lay there like a corpse, and I was deprived of my comprehension. Then he grasped my right hand and strengthened me, and set me on my feet, and said to me, what is the matter with you? And why are you so troubled? And why are your comprehension and your thoughts of your heart so troubled? And I said, because you have forsaken me, and yet I did according to your words. I went into the field, and behold, I have seen and still see what I am not able to express. And he said to me, stand up like a man, and I will instruct you. Which
Okay, I can't hear you.
We lost one Richard. Still have one Richard on, but the other one's gone.
can you hear me now?
And now.
All right. For some reason, it stopped unmuting me. I apologize. All right. I'll back up to 1033 again at the beginning. It says, and he said to me, stand up like a man, and I will instruct you. Then I said, speak on, my master, only do not forsake me, lest I die before my time, frustrate of my expectation. For I have seen that which I did not know, and heard that which I do not comprehend. Or is my sense deceived, or my inner being in a dream? Now therefore I entreat you to give your servant an explanation of this bewildering vision. Then he answered me and said, hear me, and I shall inform you, and tell you about the things which you are afraid of. For Yahuwah the Most High will reveal many secret things to you. He has seen that your way is right, for that you sorrow continually for your people, and make your great lamentation for Zion. It was the same thing that Baruch did, lamenting over Zion and making intercession for the people. Just like Moshe and others that were like them, that's the pattern that he wants for his people. But it's the same thing he said when he came. You get the plank out of your eye first, and then when you are what they call the spiritual one, or the Ruachni one, as mentioned by Shaul, you help your brother, but looking to yourself too in a Ruach of meekness so that you're not tried. Otherwise, we only cause ourselves problems and condemn ourselves when we're hypocritical in our judgment. This therefore is the meaning of the vision which you have seen. The woman who appeared to you a little while ago, whom you saw mourning and began to comfort her, but now you see the form of a woman no more, but there appeared to you an established city. And whereas she told you of the death of her son, this is the interpretation. This woman whom you saw, whom you now behold as an established city, is Zion. Whereas, for her telling you that she was barren for 30 years, it is because there were 3,000 years in the world before any offering was made in her. Just a moment. Whereas for her telling you that she was barren for 30 years, it is because there were 3,000 years in the world before any offering was made in her. And after 3,000, Shalomo built the city and offered offerings. Now that's a little off because Dawid, his father, is the one that captured the city that had already been there, but he helped build up the place, and then Shalomo built the Hikel. A little bit different. And then it was that the barren woman bore a son. And as for her telling you that she brought him up with much care and labor, that was the period of her dwelling in Yarushalem. And whereas she saying to you, when my son entered his wedding chamber, he failed and died, that was the destruction which befell Yarushalem. Some will say Yarushalem, like Salem there, and some will say Yarushalayim, where they actually, it's not written in the Hebrew, but it was common for them to add that when they said the name. I don't know enough to say which one is more authentic than the other, but I'll point it out for you. So if you see someone say Yarushalem or Yarushalayim, it's the same thing. He will come down in Shalom is what that represents. It says, and behold, you saw her likeness and how she mourned for her son. You began to console her for what had happened, and of these happenings which have affected man's well-being. These are to be opened to you. For now Yahuwah the Most High sees that you are grieved unfeignedly, and suffer from your whole heart for her. So has he shown you the brightness of her splendor, and the comeliness of her beauty. Therefore I bade you to remain in the field where no house had been built. For I knew that the Most High Yahuwah would reveal these happenings to you. Therefore I commanded you to go into the field where there was no foundation of any building. For in the place wherein the Most High Yahuwah reveals his city, there can be no building of men's hand, or of men's hands that have stood there. It should be men's hands. And therefore do not be afraid, and do not let your heart be affrighted, but go in and see the splendor and beauty and the vast greatness of the building, as far as it is possible for your eyes to be able to see. And if you recall, Revelation, we have a vision of the Shamayim Yarushalem. It mentions in Yobelim that it was shown to Abraham, that it was shown to Adam at the beginning. It's mentioned, I believe, in this book or Second Baruch. It was shown to Moshe on the mountain when he was given the commandments on Sinai. And it's revealed to his people that have the same disposition as Ezra. If I remember correctly, it might also be in Ezekiel or Yeshayahu where there's a vision of this. We also see in Gad the seer where he has a vision of the Shamayim and he sees the throne room. So there's a few different places where you can get pictures of what these things are like. The most in-depth, detailed explanation for what it's like above the firmament, though, is found in the book of Hanok, where he's actually taken, transformed into like a messenger and brought before the presence of the Father, where he perceives him but can't look at him because his garments are 7 times brighter than the sun, and not even the messengers can look at his face. Only the sun can. But I'm digressing, I apologize. We'll continue on verse 56. And then afterward you shall hear as much as your ears can comprehend. For you are more prosperous above many other, and you have been called before the Most High Yahuwah, as but few have been. Yet tomorrow at night you shall remain here, and so shall the Most High Yahuwah show you visions of what the Most High will do to those who dwell on the earth, or Eretz, in the last days. So I slept at that night and the following one, as he commanded me. All right, so you see, he didn't have a week long to wait this time. It was only a few nights before he receives these visions. But we'll go ahead and take a break here for a moment. If anyone has any comments or questions about what was shared so far, I do have one comment. When our Mashiach walked, and in the letters, the epistles of the emissaries and whatnot, we can see that they're talking about the last days or the last Yamim, even in their time. And when you look at it from the point of the creation week parable, from the 4th, 5th, and 6th Yom of the creation week, those are the last days of the week before the Shabbat. And that's the context in all of these long view where it talks about the last days. It's always talking about the period after he came the first time until he returns. But is there any comments or questions we have right here before we go on, or else we can wait until we're done?
Yeah, we also get that in, isn't it, with Barnabas? He kind of tells where the disciples at the time, believed where they were at, in the 7,000 year scheme of things, or, along the lines of the 7-day creation,
Mm-hmm.
and how he had believed that our Mashiach had come in between, the 4th and the 5th, at the ending of the 4th, but the beginning of the 5th day, between light and life, which just kind of goes and backs that up.
Yeah, he mentions in the Epistle of Barnabas that he would go into more depth, but you wouldn't comprehend these things at this time because they're all in parables. He makes that admission right there, and it is quite the witness. But once you see the parable in creation week and how that lines up with history until the millennial reign, you can't be deceived about what's going to happen, what was going on, the real things that he's doing in history, because the creation account is about what our creator is effectively working in creation in that time, and it was a parable of his works through history until the millennial reign. It's not about what the enemy's doing so much. You get that in different places. The beast reigns that are ruling over the world until he returns. That goes into details about them and their stuff. When you hear about Leviathan and Behemoth and that nature, it's going into depth about that system. But when you look at his works, what he did in the first 6 literal yom, or literal days of creation, that's a parable of his things that he's affecting. And the one thing you can see, the easiest one, the 4th yom, he created the sun, the moon, and the stars. The sun is like the bridegroom, it says in Psalm 19. It's the light of the world, who all authority was given to. It's the same picture of our Mashiach, who came preaching the reign of the Shamayim, or the Malkuth Shamayim, the kingdom of heavens, as it's called. And that lines up with the moon. And then you have the psalmic with the stars, which are the children of light running the course set before them. So you have a parable of what he created from the beginning there, and then what he walked out when he came. It plays out in history. You can do that with every day, every creation, and actually line it up with the outset, and it all goes to tell about his stuff. But once you learn that, then you can't be lied to about what happened in history, what they're doing, and especially the things that are going on right now. Um, that was excellent, though. Was there any other comments or questions? All right, so chapter 11, and this is the eagle vision that he received after waiting a few yamim. It mentions in the text here that this is the same beast that Daniel received the vision of the 4th beast in his vision. It wasn't the beast vision from Nebuchadnezzar, but it was the one that Daniel received himself, where it was an indistinct, terribly fearsome animal that crushed all with its iron. This gives you a little more detail about what that beast actually looks like and how it plays out. If you want to take this, I haven't done it perfectly and lined it up all the way. I don't know how accurate it is or if it's been tampered with. But if you take the vision here and you start with the feathers that rain, starting with Julius Caesar, that's the beginning of this beast period. After the republic fell, after the monarchy, let me correct, after the monarchy that was established in Rome 700 BC with the founding of the city. Let me back up a little bit more. Hold on. When the children were in Egypt, some of them, there was pre-migrations. If you remember, everything that happens is a microcosm of what would happen later, especially with the children. What they do in a little scale, they walk out in a larger scale. But sometimes it's reversed. So when they were in Mitzrayim, which our Mashiach came like Moshe, came to deliver them from spiritual Mitzrayim, as they call it. But when they were in Mitzrayim, there was some pre-Exodus migrations that happened. And some of them, including Zerah's children, Darda, Mehol, Ethan, Heman, they went out and they founded different areas: Phoenicia, Attica, the kingdom of Attica, Athens in Greece, Thebes in Greece, and the city of Troy. In Troy, they lived there for a few hundred years, and then there was a disagreement between peoples. The Greeks wanted to marry one of the Trojans' daughters, but they would not marry off their women unless the Greeks observed the laws of the altar and sacrificed to Yahuwah only for 7 years. The man took offense to it and sieged the place, but after a certain time, they became reprobate. And so he delivered a remnant and destroyed the city with the Trojan horse. But the survivors that were perfect, they were kept from harm and taken, and they traveled around in different places, and their history is recorded in what's known as the Ancient History of Caledonia, which is a book that you can find on the internet for free, or you can purchase it for under $20. It's an amazing resource that covers Darda's remnant from about 1500 BC to 1290 AD. But the survivors of Troy that were apostate, some of them were taken as slaves, some of them were killed, and some of them scattered throughout the area. One of them went to Rome or Italy, and it was the grandson of the survivor that married one of the kings of the Latinum Confederation and founded the city of Rome. This is known in history. It was a relative of his, was named Brutus, who killed his father while they were in Italy. He was banned from the area, and he ended up going freeing some Trojan slaves from another Greek province and then taking them to Britain, founding London, and that's the original British people, the Britons of that time. This is all pre-Shalomo, but during the reign of Shalomo, when the Phoenicians were running throughout the world and he was in collusion with them, they spent 3-year journeys going, circumnavigating the world, going to the Americas, north and south, the Philippines, which was Ophir, and traveling all over doing their shipping, but they were all working together at that time. These pre-migrations, however, before Shalomo was in power, you had Hebrews already spread throughout Gaul, throughout Europe, Sicily, Greece, intermixed with the sons of Japheth there. But it's a foreshadow of what would happen when they went into the land, and then the northern reign separated and left. However, in the reverse of that, it's like it says Yahuwah is our mirror, and a lot of times when you see some things that happened in the original stories, they're flipped when it is in comparison to our Mashiach. For example, it was all the brothers selling Yahusuf into slavery, but in the reverse of that, it was one betraying our Mashiach. And then you have a different parallel where it's flipped like that a lot. In this instance, you had in Mitzrayim, the righteous separated from them and left the land beforehand. But in this instance, it was because of wickedness. They were kicked out of the land and spread out. So it's an opposite of that. However, there's consecutive waves, and there's different things that you can see how it plays out, micro scale and then larger scale. And that's just one thing that I recently noticed I wanted to point out. But the leaders, the point is, like Alexander the Great, son of Yahuda, actually of the seed of Yahuda, line of Zerah. The Caesars of Rome under the Julius family were the original monarchs of the area, and they were from the seed of Zerah, the line of Yahuda. The same thing with the monarchs in Spain at the time and in Britain, but they weren't necessarily walking correctly with our Maker. It was foretold to them both in the original covenant writings and in the extra writings, like in the testaments of the 12 patriarchs and the book of Yobelim, where not only would the seed of Yahuda, or the seed of Abraham, would reign over many nations. That promise was given to Yitzhak, and it was given to Yaakov, that everywhere the soles of the feet of men have tread, he would have children reigning. And then that promise was given to Yahuda. And that's something that you can see actually playing out. But to get back on track here, this is a vision of the Caesars in Rome. When you first had Rome become a city, it was a monarchy with the survivor of Troy marrying one of the daughters of the sovereign of the Latinum Confederation. He later rose up and conquered them, fought and dominated over them, and that was the beginnings of their expansion through conquest and bloodshed, which was not according to the desire of our Maker. If you remember what Scripture says about founding a city on bloodshed and doing those things, it all plays out, and you can see through history the cause and effect of everything that happened once you learn it. However, they had a monarchy, and then if you remember in the book of Revelation, in the anti-Mashiach for dummy videos, it talks about it too, but it has the part where it says that he is one of the eighth and he is of the seven, and it's talking about how, an allusion to the anti-Mashiach. You can look at it both in the first 8 monarchs of the Roman kingdom. Number 6 was Sixtus, or he was the son of the 6th one, or the 7th monarch. I don't want to mess that up too much, but he actually rose up, tried to usurp the throne, and he defiled a woman to the point where the Roman citizens rose up and threw out the monarchy, and they established the republic from that. In a flip from here, it's the same parallel we have now, where the papacy in Babylon and Europe was a monarchy. They had the divine right to rule, where they said it for a long time, but then we overthrew that and we made the republics again. So it was the same kind of pattern. Eventually, though, they, through machinations or whatever, went through the republic to the triumvirate, where there was 3 ruling dictators, and eventually Julius Caesar reigning as an emperor. And that's when this vision actually starts and culminates. So if you keep that in mind, and then you realize the second feather is the longest reigning one, that was Augustus Caesar, who was the longest reigning Caesar of the 12 that ruled before the end of the Flavian dynasty. So with all that being said, we'll go ahead and get into this now. And I apologize if that's over anyone's head. I was just trying to give you a little filler information to help this have more context. This
Well, that really helped with the Grecian side first, the Seleucids, how it started with them, because I guess them, and even though Rome came after them, they were still kind of one and the same, blended.
Exactly. That's why, and you can even see this in the, like I was telling Jeanette about the Nicolaitan error. They remove a lot of the stuff, but you can still see the evidence or effect in Scripture, even if it's not clearly stated. When you look at the account, I think it's in the book of Acts, or it could be in one of the Besorah accounts, when they're talking about our Mashiach, and it's in one of the Besorah accounts, but he's talking to the Yahudim, and he says, what, is he going to go to the dispersion amongst the Greeks where we can't find him? So they knew about these things. It just isn't clearly put in the common scriptures anymore for our benefit. Just so you're aware, that very knowledge, that all these things 100 years ago, 200 years ago, they knew these things. They wrote about them. Even in the 1980s, this was common knowledge for some believers. And it wasn't until they really turned up the heat with the Second Ecumenical Movement, 1960s, Vatican Council II, and they started putting in their bringing in the daughters and getting everyone to agree with error. They started muddying the waters after that era, specifically the 1980s. I don't know if we had it when I was alive at all, but before then, they definitely knew that. In 1981, for example, a gentleman named Terry Bloodgood got his doctrinal dissertation, got his doctorate by writing his dissertation about the phonological similarities between the Germanic languages and the Hebrew. So they knew it, he admitted it, he pointed out the fact that all Germanic languages came from the Hebrew, and he actually shows how they shifted in over time and what caused those sound shifts, and how it all ties into the modern. If anyone knows Hebrew language, the Begad Kafath letters are the ones that shifted in German twice when they were influenced by the migrations of the 12 tribes in different ways. So it's really interesting. Just one moment. All right, so this is chapter 11, verse 1, the eagle vision. It says, "On the second night I had a dream, and behold, there came up from the sea an eagle, which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads." So it's the beast out of the sea. You can see. "And I saw, and behold, she spread her wings over all the earth, and all the winds of the Shamayim blew on her, and the clouds were gathered together about her." If you remember the parallels or the parables in scripture, I'll just point out a few here, and possibly you can think of some others. Just, yes, our sister Tammy mentioned the language shifted a bit from the Hebrew to Irish too, and that's accurate as well. In the ancient history of Caledonia, you can see the shift when they were heading, when the Hebrews migrated and they went north and west, they spoke Gaelic. They kept the form, they kept the structure of the language, the suffixes and prefixes and how it works still is identical to Hebrew, but the sounds shifted. And so it actually sounds completely different from what you hear in the Hebrew, but it functions identical. So in the reverse of that, when they went to the east first, they lost the use of the suffixes and prefixes. And when they lost the use of that, it locked the sounds into certain positions and they didn't shift anymore. But you still had the words sounding similar, but the function of how the language worked was changing. So it's it's a little different. You get an amalgamation of the languages in England, and that's how we get English in the way it speaks, because you had the Angles and Saxons, which were Germanic, low Germanic languages, mixing with the Gaelic languages that were there, and then you have an influx of the Danes and then the Normans with the French Latin and the other mixtures that caused what became the English language. But every time there was a confrontation or a a mixing of the peoples that originally spoke the same language, there's always a shift in it, and it's a interesting phenomenon to look at. You can see that in particular if you look up Webster's Dictionary, the 1886 edition. It's free online. It actually has the history of the English language and how it worked in that time. And when you read the history of it, you can see every time they came in, the shifts and the things it caused, like a gong going off and hitting, and boom, every time it did that, it caused a shift in how it worked. It's an interesting phenomenon. I don't even know. I'm barely scratching the surface with how I comprehend it, but it's something I stumbled across that I thought was fascinating. All right, we'll continue here. Anyways, the parables in this, you can see she spread her wings like the wings of the eagle, being held aloft by the wind, is mentioned in the Proverbs. Shalomo says it's one of the things he can't comprehend is an eagle in the Shamayim, because they're a bird of prey being held aloft by the Ruach. So it's an interesting phenomenon he couldn't get his mind around. But this is all alluding to that. Clouds are like the witnesses, the winds are the Ruach, if you can follow along. And if you have any more of those, feel free to point them out either when we stop or at the end of the break there. But I'll keep going. "And I beheld, and out of her wings there grew other contrary wings, and they became a little pudgy wings. But her heads were at rest. The head in the middle was greater than the other, yet rested it with the rest of them. Moreover, I looked, and behold, the eagle flew with her wings, and reigned upon the eretz, or earth, and over them that dwelt in it. And I saw that all things under Shamayim were subject to her, and no man spoke against her, no, not even one creature that is on eretz, or earth." And I looked, and behold, the eagle rose upon her talons, and uttered a cry to her wings, saying, Do not all watch at the same time. Let each sleep in her own place, and watch by the course of her turn. But let the heads be preserved for the last. And I looked, and behold, the voice did not come out from her heads, but from the middle of her body. And I numbered her opposing wings, and behold, there were 8 of them. And I looked, and behold, on the right side there arose one feather, and reigned over all the earth. And so it was, that when it rained, the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more. So the next wing following stood up, and reigned, and had a long reign. And that would be Augustus Caesar. Right? And it happened that when it reigned, the end of it came also, like as the first, that it appeared no more, or so that it appeared no more. Then came there a voice to it, and said, Hear you that have borne rule over the Eretz so long, this I say to you, before you begin to appear no more. There shall none after you obtain to your time, neither to the half thereof. And this is how we can know that you start the dating of the 12 wings that reigned with the Caesars, because of the pattern right here. The second Caesar reigned longer than any of them that came after. All right. Then arose the third wing, and reigned as the other before, and appeared no more also. So went it with all the wing one after another, as that everyone reigned with power, and then appeared no more. Then I looked, and behold, in due process of time, the wings that followed stood up upon the right side, that they might rule also. And some of them ruled, but within a while they disappeared suddenly. And some of them rose up, but did not rule. After this I looked, and behold, the 12 wings appeared no more, nor the 2 little wings. And there was no more upon the eagle's body, but 3 heads that rested, and 6 little wings. Then saw I also that 2 little wings divided themselves from the 6, and remained under the head that was upon the right side, but the 4 continued in their place. And I looked, and behold, these 2 little wings planned to set themselves up, and to hold the rule. And I looked, and behold, there was one set up, but suddenly disappeared. And the second also, this one disappeared more quickly than the first. And I looked, and behold, the 2 that remained were planning between themselves to reign together. And when they were planning, behold, there awakened one of the heads that were at rest, namely, the one that was in the middle, for that was greater than the other 2 heads. And I saw how it allied the 2 heads with itself. And behold, the head turned with 2 that were with it, and did eat up the 2 little wings which were planning to reign. Moreover, this middle head gained control of the whole Eretz, or earth, and with much oppression dominated its inhabitants, and it had greater power over the world than all the wings that had gone before. We'll go back over this. I just want to finish reading, okay? And after this I looked, and behold, the middle head suddenly disappeared, and was no more. just as the wings had done. But there remained the two heads, which also ruled over the earth, or Eretz, and its inhabitants. And I looked, and behold, the head upon the right side devoured the one that was upon the left side. Then I heard a voice which said to me, Look before you, and consider what you see. And that's what we're going to do here in just one moment. And I looked, and behold, a creature like a lion was aroused out of the forest, roaring. And I heard how he uttered with a man's voice to the eagle, and spoke, saying, Hear you, I will speak with you what the Most High Yahuwah shall say to you. Are you not the one that remained of the four beasts whom I made to reign in my world, that the end of my times might come through them? And you the fourth that has come and has conquered all the beasts that have gone before, and had power over the world with great fearful terror, and over the Eretz with much grievous oppression. And for so long as you have dwelt upon the Eretz with deceit, and you have judged the earth, but not with truth. For you have afflicted the meek, you have injured the shalomful, or the peaceable, you have hated those who tell the truth, you have loved liars, and you have destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit, and have cast down the walls of them, as did you no harm. Therefore is your insolent wrongful dealings has come up before the Most High Yahuwah, and your pride before the Almighty. And the Most High Yahuwah has also looked upon his times, and behold, they are ended, and his ages are completed, and his abominations are fulfilled. Therefore you will surely disappear, you eagle, and your terrifying wings, and your most vile, or your most evil little wings, and your malicious heads, and your most evil talons, and your whole worthless body, so that the whole Eretz be freed from your violence, and may be refreshed in return, being delivered from your violence, that she may have expectation of arbitration and loving kindness of him that made her. All right, now, before we continue, all right, would I comment about the deliberate use of the different word in the common language translations? If you can be specific about what words, and I'll certainly do that, but I don't quite comprehend what you're asking there. Just to back up, for anyone not familiar with what we've covered before, when you look at what's in Scripture, Leviathan is made on the fifth Yom. It mentions in Yobelim. You get detail about that in 4th Ezra here, 2nd Baruch, in the book of Hanok, Yobelim, and then also in the book of Job. You get great detail about Behemoth and Leviathan. Leviathan being the beast out of the sea, a representation of it, and Behemoth being the beast out of the earth. In Revelation, it's given as distinct and separate. You have the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth, also mentioned that way. But here, for the purposes of who's going to reign until our Mashiach returns, there isn't another power. It's only a proxy that they're using. So the vision that we see here is only one beast, but it ends up having three heads at the end. And this is a pretty amazing thing when you consider what it represents. If you know, for anyone that's not familiar, the beast reigns are established in the book of Daniel. The first beast was Babylon, the head of gold from the statue. But then the next beast was the Medo-Persian Empire. The beast that followed was the Grecian Empire. And then the last beast reign was the Roman Empire. And that reign, just like it mentions about the statue, It rules until our Mashiach comes and establishes his reign that will not yield its sovereignty to another. So we can't get past that fact. When you look at Revelation and it talks about the beast rising up out of the earth, it distinctly mentions that it makes an image of the first beast in its presence and causes all to wonder after it and worship it, and through it worship Satan. That's a culmination of what's happened in history, where you had Rome as a dominant power. It was alive during the persecutions, had the Inquisition, the Reformation, and what happened with the witnessing against it was like the death blow or the wounding, as we're familiar with in the common scriptures, but really it's like the butchering of the head that all the world rejoiced over when they saw it, is the literal translation that you can see in the Greek. And also when you look into the anti-Mashiach for Dummies videos, he goes into great detail on that. But Beast Out of the Earth is part of that system and is working towards its goals. In here, you see it as one of the heads. The main head would be Papal Rome, or the Roman Empire in its Catholic state. Then the other two heads there, you'd be more familiar with as the city-states that rule the world. You have Vatican City as the big head. Then you have the one which is the British Empire, the financial system that was set up after the expelling of the Jesuits. Adam Weishaupt created the Illuminati. He went with the Rothschilds to help get funding, and then he uses them as the holders of the Vatican funds to run these things through. And it's actually the Rothschilds that control the IMF and the international banks for the papacy. It's the whole purpose of control for the papacy, though. And then on the reverse, the other head would be Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, that is the corporate usurpation of the constitutional republic. That beast, part of that head, that's the military might for this system that's running the world right now. That's what this is explaining. I've never seen it before until I'd been learning history and came across that stuff. But Father willing, with that information, you can see how this is playing out. But if you have any comments or questions about that, or it doesn't make sense, please don't hesitate to say so. The feathers and wings reigning were the Caesars and the emperors, the schisms that happened until the papacy came about, which was made legitimate with you had Constantine come to power, and he actually gave the papal crown, of the Pontifex Maximus to Sylvester, the overseer of Rome at the time. And that was foretold, also showed in Revelation, and foretold in the stars there with that advent. But that was when they had that usurpation happen, and that beast was waking up. All right. Is there any comments or questions about that particular information or what we just read? If you don't, we can continue. Okay, that was really clear. No problem. All right. And then Pearl said, when a word such as Lord is plastered over Yahuwah's Shem. Okay. Yeah, a lot of times, and this is something that you'll see more as we go along. I don't hold against anyone if they don't know better, but I like to share what's true. We have intentional error that was brought in. If you remember, when our Mashiach walked in the flesh, his own people mistreated and abused him at night and handed him over to the Romans to kill. And he is the truth. He represents the word given to man and what we've done with him in history. So you can see a clear correlation between what happened with his flesh and what we've done with the word in history. In doing that, there's a lot of pagan sun worship that's been intermixed with the true word or with the belief, and that causes confusion. But anytime they remove his name and add a title, that's the same thing you can read back in the original covenant writings about the children calling on Baal instead of Yahuwah and the consequences for that. So Shaul mentions how all these things are written for our edification, for our instruction and benefit, so that those who are alive at this time can learn to do what's pleasing to our Maker and turn from the error. But it involves confessing our sins and the sins of our fathers or patriarchs, which means we have to acknowledge the things that we've done wrong and the things that have been done wrong carried down in history, which includes the wrong feasts, the wrong names, the any error that's been added into scripture, including words like holy, grace, um, even spirit. You have different things of that nature where day, for example, was about sun worship. All of those things, those words tie directly into pagan rites and worship. And the words that were originally in the Hebrew don't necessarily mean that, or they have a different English word that has a better meaning. We just try to use that one and avoid anything that has to do with error. So just to put that, and as I go through, I'll try to point those out as well. So thank you, Pearl. But let's get back where we were here. You can see, just so when you get the context for who it's speaking of, right? And the fourth beast, right, conquered all the beasts. Rome dominated over Babylon, the Medes and Persians, Greece, right? So this is literally true. But it says, you've had power over the whole world with great fearful terror, and over all the Eretz with much grievous oppression. And this is literally what they've done through the Dark Ages, where they destroyed any record of the truth outside of what they held and kept it, so that people lived in darkness and ignorance and did things that were not beneficial. Oppression, ignorance. They persecute those that were Tob. They afflicted the meek. This is literally, the Inquisition was to prove those that would love the truth more than their own being. So, Father willing, you can see how this is literally speaking about them. We don't really need to cover what we read again. But if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and continue. All right. And then when we stop, I'll probably read another chapter. We'll get the explanation, and then we'll stop for questions and comments from everybody. And that'll probably be sufficient for our Shabbat there. So here's chapter 12. And it came to pass, whiles the lion spoke these words to the eagle, I looked, and behold, the remaining head disappeared, and the two wings that had gone over to it arose and set themselves up to reign. Now, if you're paying attention, these are things that have not happened yet. This is actually foretelling the future. The three heads were the three city-states. The larger head, if this is accurate, because sometimes we have muddied versions of what was carried down, but if this is accurate, the larger head is papal Rome. It's going to be taken out by one of the two heads, either the business district Britain or America. And then from there, the last two are going to fight amongst themselves, as we see. These are things that are culminating in what they're planning to do right now. If you've ever looked at Albert Pike's 3 World Wars or seen the information about what they're trying to accomplish on that end, all of it's being steered by our Creator, and He's foretold these things to His chosen. And that's the whole purpose of studying these things, so that we're not confused by what they put out, and then we can see plainly what's written. But he said, behold, the remaining head disappeared, and two wings that had gone over to it arose and set themselves up to reign. And their reign was brief and full of tumult. And I looked, and behold, they also disappeared. And the whole body of the eagle was burnt, so that the Eretz was exceedingly terrified. Then I awoke in great perplexity of mind and great fear. And I said to my Ruach, behold, you have brought this upon me, because you search out the ways of Most High Yahuwah. Behold, I am still I am still weary in mind and very weak in my ruach, and not even a little strength is left in me because of the great fear with which I have been terrified this night. And that's reminiscent of what happened with Daniel after his visions, where he was weakened and his strength had left him as well. If I'm remembering correctly, that's also where you can see our Mashiach without him actually mentioning it. But the messenger who appears to Daniel at that time speaks to him to be strong. And then Daniel says, "Ooh, your words have made me stronger. Tell me more." And he tells him to get up and to be strong. And then he explains stuff to him. But he's one speaking with authority, and what he says happens. It's our Mashiach that appeared to him at that point. Beforehand, it might have been a different messenger, but when that happened, that was him. And that's something that's alluded to by Kepha, where he says that our Mashiach secretly has revealed himself to the righteous through all ages. And you can see it in different places throughout Scripture, but he doesn't overtly say who he is. Just for another witness to that, or two witnesses, Jacob, when he sees Yahuwah at the top of that ladder with messengers ascending and descending, he sees him, which no man can see the Father. And that same allusion of the one ascending and descending is alluded to Nathan by our Mashiach when he said, "Do you believe because of this? I tell you, you shall now see messengers ascending and descending upon the son of Adam," saying that that was him. But going back further than that, Abraham had visions and then both saw three men, including Yahuwah, and he went and bowed to him and served him food and had him eat with him, washed his feet. And that was our Mashiach as well. But it doesn't overtly say that. In the recognitions of Clement, Kepha plainly says that our Mashiach appears to the righteous in different ways and different times throughout the ages as it's convenient for him to do so. All right. So continuing verse 6. Therefore will I now beseech the Most High Yahuwah that he will comfort and strengthen me to the end. And so I said, Yahuwah that bear rule, if I have found free unmerited favor before your sight, and if I have been accounted righteous before you beyond many others, and if my prayer has indeed come up before your presence, comfort and strengthen me, and show me, your servant, the interpretation and meaning of this terrifying vision, that you may fully comfort my inner being. I don't like to do that too much, but I like to point out things when I see it. Our Creator is impartial. He does not play favorites, and he has a contractual obligation to do what he said, to be trustworthy to his own word. So you see that he's mentioned a few times because of Ezra's disposition, because of how he chooses to be, he receives answers to his prayers, revelation for things that he doesn't get, and things of that nature. In the very same way, anyone who conforms themselves to that way of being will have the same benefit because he is not partial. All right, continuing in verse 9. For you have judged me worthy to be shown the end of the times and the last events of the time. And he said to me, this is the interpretation of the vision which you have seen. The eagle whom you saw come up from the sea is the kingdom or the reign which was seen in the vision of Daniel, or your brother Daniel. But it was not expounded to him. Therefore now I declare it to you. Behold, the Yamim, or days, shall come, that there shall rise up a kingdom, or reign upon earth, and it shall be more terrifying than all the reigns that have been before it. And 12 sovereigns shall reign in it, one after another. But the second that is to reign shall have more time than any of the 12. This is the interpretation of the 12 wings signify. Sorry. This is the interpretation of the 12 wings signify, which you saw. That's a little butchered. I apologize. As for your hearing a voice that spoke, coming not from the eagle's heads, but from the midst of his body, this is the interpretation, that after the time of that reign there shall arise great strivings, and it shall stand in peril of falling. Nevertheless, it shall not fall then, but shall regain again its former power. The upheavals and the civil wars that had happened after the Caesars of Rome's time, and then that culminated in Constantine coming to power, and then his moving his reign over to the Byzantine or eastern part, and he actually gave the crown of the Pontifex Maximus to Sylvester, the overseer of Rome at the time, as we'd mentioned earlier. This is, whereas you saw the 8 little wings, under wings, clinging to her wings, this is the interpretation, that in him there shall arise 8 sovereigns, whose time shall be short, and their years swift. And 2 of them shall perish when the middle of their time approaches, and 4 shall be kept for the time when its end began to approach. But 2 shall be kept until the end. And whereas you saw 3 heads resting, this is the interpretation. In his last Yamim shall the Most High raise up 3 reigns, and they shall renew many things in it, and they shall have the dominion of the earth, or Eretz. The Hebrew word for Eretz is Aleph Resh Zaudi, and if you break down what that means, Aleph means I am or I will, and Retz or Rutz is run, like to run a course or a carrier. So the earth, in that sense, is the place where you run your course.
I have a question, but doesn't Eretz also, or I thought it translated over to land?
Adama is the land, and yes, Eretz is the land, the earth, the land. They're synonyms.
Okay.
But when
I'm just
I was
making
talking
sure.
to, oh, go ahead.
I'm just making sure it's not Haaretz Israel, is what I was making sure that, because there is a lot of places where they put the earth word and it really means the land, like
Yes,
the set apart land of Israel.
exactly. And anytime you see, like, it was specific here where it talked about all the Eretz was what went under the dominion here. And then it talks about the Eretz in that capacity. So you got to go on the context of whatever's in the particular chapters, but particularly in Revelation, and most of the time when it's talking about that and it says earth, the common idea that pops into some people's mind that it's the spinning ball in space entirely, all the planet. That's not the concept that was ever used by these people. It was the land that they were on, most often the local area that they were speaking of, not the entirety of the world. So you are right about that. And when you do have it where it's encompassing all the Eretz or earth, it usually says that like it said here or up ahead. Verse 24 says, and its inhabitants more oppressively than all who were before them. Therefore they are called the heads of the eagle. And these heads, again, is Vatican City, the business district of London, and Washington, D.C. All of them are separate city-states, not becoming to their own nations. They have their own constitutions and other things of that nature. I can't speak so much for the Vatican City and London because I don't live there. I'm not familiar with it as much. But the business district of London, it's a usurpation, or the business district, or sorry, the District of Columbia. That area was originally lauded, but it was the people that came in after that usurped the constitutional republic that brought in the witchcraft, the Masonic symbology and all the error. That was not the original founding principles of our nation, although they try to say that. But you can actually prove it in Scripture with what we're learning, with the foretellings of things that happened, especially in Revelation. If you watch the Anti-Mashiach for Dummies videos, the the founding of Republican government with liberty of conscience, starting with the Republic in Britain that carried over with the Puritans coming to America and the founding of the nation, all of that was foretold in Scripture. And that wasn't a negative context. It was after that where you had the usurpation of the things that were supposed to be established in this nation. That's what they're running. But here we go. And if you're wondering that why we see everything that's going on, that's why. You have major things happening, but one of the things they try to push is the wrong narrative. They have this futurist theology that they literally put things out to try to get men to believe. And if you pay attention to who's the current president for that corporation, for example, and it came in through fraud and deceit. If you look through the bullet points of what the anti-Mashiach is supposed to be like from Daniel, and then look at what's going on, they do that stuff on purpose to get us to hook to it and to bite on that. But it's intentional deception. But here we go. Verse 25. For these are they who shall accomplish his final wickedness and perform his last actions. And whereas you saw that the eagle or the great head appeared no more, it signifies that one of them shall die upon his bed, and yet with pain. For the two that remain shall be slain with the sword. For the sword of the one shall devour the other who was with him, but at the end he shall fall by the sword in the last Yamim. As for you, seeing two little wings from under the wings passing over the head, that is on the right side, this is the interpretation. It signifies that these are they whom the Most High Yahuwah has kept for the eagle's end. This was the reign which was brief and full of trouble, as you saw. And the lion whom you saw rising up out of the wood and roaring, and speaking to the eagle, and rebuking her for her unrighteousness with all the words which you have heard. This is the Mashiach, which the Most High Yahuwah has kept until the end of Yamim, who will arise from the posterity of Dawid or David, and will come to speak to them. He will denounce them for their chesedlessness, or their lack of loving kindness, and for their wickedness, and will cast up before them their contemptuous dealings. For first he shall set them living before his judgment seat, and shall rebuke them. Then he will destroy them. Just like the parable he came when he returns and all the messengers bring the wheats and the tares, or he separates the goats from the sheep. It's mentioned, as you see right here, Daniel 7, 1st Enoch 48, and chapter 62. There's a few more places that talk about it as well. All right. For the rest of my people shall he deliver with loving kindness, those that have been pressed upon throughout my borders, and he shall make them joyful until the end comes, the yom of judgment, whereof I have spoken to you from the beginning. This is the dream that you saw, and this is the interpretation. And you alone were worthy to learn this secret of the Most High Yahuwah. Therefore write all these things that you have seen in a book, and put it in a hidden place, and teach them to the prudent among your people, whose hearts you know are able to comprehend and keep these secrets. But wait you here yourself yet 7 Yamim more, so that you may be shown whatever it pleases the Most High Yahuwah to show you. And with that, he went his way. All right. So I interrupted quite a bit there, but maybe that might be a good place to stop, or toe place to stop. Do you have any comments or questions for what we've read so far? Anything that you'd like to share? Any questions or things that you're not certain about? If you'd like, I can pause the recording. Here, I'll go ahead and